So now with the engine on the lift, I'm going to put some grease on the outer flange, and also on the oil seal itself. Here I am. So I've pressed the oil seal in. Make sure it goes right down to the bottom of the lip, if you see what I mean, when you've got it in. And then just a little bit of oil, a bit of grease around there. Now there's an O-ring, don't forget to put the O-ring in, that's kind of important. Now just as a little tip, I put a little bit of silicone sealer at the back of that RTV black stuff, just to hold it in place so it doesn't drop out while you're fitting it. Talking about fitting it, let's fit it. So we have to be really careful with this seal, how it goes on. We mustn't damage the lip. So a little bit at a time, push it in. You're supposed to have a special insertion tool for this, but we haven't got one. There we go. Just make sure there's no lip sticking out, lipstick. Ah. And then we'll get the bolts, put a little bit of Loctite on them. Now there isn't a torque for these bolts, so I'm just going to rattle them down with a gun evenly, make sure they're alright. Right, that's those on. Just remember at the top here there's two little tabs for the wiring for the starter. The next thing we're going to do is fit the flywheel now, because I put some degreaser in the thread holes, but I want to change the bush. I forgot to change it, but I'm going to put the flywheel on before I change that, for the simple reason I don't want any swath going down the holes, because I'm just going to put the die grinder around that and just knock it out, you know, just cut it. I'm not going to mess about with hydraulic in it, I'll be there all day. So let's get the flywheel on. So now it's time to fit the flywheel. I'm just going to leave the camera running, I'll edit this bit out, and then I'll just simply plonk the flywheel on, and then we'll get some bolts into it. There is a dowel, a location dowel on here. So at the top, we've left two big bolts in here so we can locate. Bolts in just to pull it down a little bit. The flywheel was quite rusty, but I crown rust proofed it. Drink up. And it's done really well. It's been stuck in the shop floor for about 3 months. A little bit of Loctite on just in case. The threads are nice and clean. Don't put Loctite on if the threads are oily. It doesn't really work all that well. I'm quite surprised we've still got all the nuts and bolts after all this time. I was just looking down there, I thought I lost one. Right, let me get a spanner. I'm going to wind these down by hand and then we're going to torque them down. Damn, I realised the bloody camera was off. So what I did was I put a flat bar between the teeth of the flywheel for the starter ring, and it came out here, and then I could jam that up while I progressively tightened that up. That was a disappointment, I suppose, but at least it's been done. The torque was 60 to 65 pounds. The next thing, I'm going to replace the clutch bush. Well, the flywheel bush, I suppose. And now you can see why I put the flywheel on first. So I'm going to try and get that one out, and all I'm going to do is just use a die grinder when I can find it. Here. Because you can do them with all different types of means and methods and stuff like this, but sometimes we haven't got time for all that. Let me go and get a bush. Right, here we go. No, we don't. Here we are. Where's my grinder? Now, there's a new flywheel bush. They're oil light, which means it's little tiny pieces of brass all compressed together. So there's oil in the little spaces between, like the atoms or something like that. But anyway, soak them in oil for 24 hours before you fit them. Kind of important, don't put them in dry, it's not just a brass bush. We'll chisel and see if that will break up now. There we go. Right, get some brake cleaner. All the debris out. Blow it out. And then, using a washer on the end of your input shaft, slide the bush on. Has it got a leading edge? That one's more rounded than the other side, just check it. One bush installed. That was easy, wasn't it? Next, we'll put the clutch on. Clutch plate, new, for the use of. I've put some anti-seize on the splines. I'm wiping off any excess now. Notice, this says flywheel side. Now, what quality clutch did I put in this? I just put a regular Brit clutch in. Why? Well, this hasn't got a lot of power, this engine. Well, it's 60-70 horsepower or something like that. And I've had a bit of good use out of these with like petrol engines and things like this, low powers. But when it comes to TDIs, I always fit the Valeo ones, alright? But they seem to be alright, they seem to be manufactured okay. I'm sure somebody's had problems with them, but I haven't. Now, why am I putting a fine spline in here when I said this is going to go in a series? Well, I have a LT77 to go on this, which is going to make a really nice conversion for somebody, whoever that person is. So, we know the clutch bush is lubed up, and look at that for a nice tight fit, that's good. Now we'll degrease the cover and we'll put it on. Right, again, the cover's been degreased. I was just going to say, actually the build quality of this looks just the same as a Valeo one. I would not be surprised if they're actually made by them. I noticed the Valeo ones are like made in Turkey. But, you know, the materials and the finish is good. It's very hard to say what are good parts now, because The Chinese have really sort of upped their ante with quality, in my opinion. I mean, look at all the brakes and things like that. Even Lockheed are having them made in China now. So it must be that good. Right, I'm putting new bolts in. I'm putting a little bit of Loctite on them when it comes out. There we go. Line up the dowels. Oh. It's like I've got a nail down here. Now, getting more on the start, I think it's the problem. I think I might just put a long bolt in, because these are notoriously difficult to get started, and I'll just whiz them down with a little gun and then we'll torque them down. Now I like to put these flange-headed bolts in here because they fit nice and snug in here. There's not much room really to get a spanner in. Yeah. And we'll just use this gun to whiz them down, and it's a 25 to 27 foot-pounds to torque them down. Oh, I'm so glad I got my batteries fixed on this, because this gun's very useful. It's a good all-round gun, if you see what I mean. Oh no, that one there. I'm going to leave that one in. Right, now we'll tighten them down. If it will. See, it's not much, is it? That's done already. Now we'll just go around them, make sure they're all tight. Once more, because we're not coming back into here for a long time. Yeah. As you know, we're sticking it up for a while. There we go. So that should see that engine just about right. In the next stage, we'll put the starter on. The starter for this 2.25 is a kind of a little different to the original starters. You know, the old Bendix ones where they used to fly in and things like this. So this is a little bit different. So I had to buy it special because somebody borrowed the old one. Never brought it back. No, I hope it's the right one. Oh yeah, it's just a snug fit. So now we've got to find some bolts and some washers. I think they're 17s. They used to be 3/8. Let me find some bolts. For some strange reason I always call nuts bolts and bolts nuts. I don't know why. Let me get a couple of nuts. Put a little dab of anti-seize on these, because somebody will thank you for that later. I always put anti-seize on everything because it might be able to take it off again. So we'll put a flat washer on, flat washer, spring washer, nut, and a nut. And then we'll tighten that down. I don't like putting lock washers on, like lock-in nuts, nylock nuts, in places that's really difficult to access like this, because otherwise you're spinning spanners around where it's, you know, like trying to get a lock nut off. Whereas if you try to get something like this off, when you've got limited space, it's so much easier. This thread on this one's not particularly good, naturally, but you know, like this one at the back can be a real pain. I think we're just about there. I mean, we'll put a... we can't get this started because we haven't got a carb for it, which is a bit of a pity. Well, we have one, but I haven't rebuilt it. I mean, we could do that in a different video. But the main thing is I want this out the way and into the container for now, until it's sold. Because winter's coming on, and we're promised not so much cold this year, but a lot of snow, which is why I've been sort of busy tidying my yard, but that's why I haven't done that many videos. That's not going to come off. There we are. All I've got to do now is find out the bolt that goes in here, and that should be it. Oh, I mentioned on another video, I was going to tell you about the heads on these. This is I think this is is it an 8-to-1 compression or a 9-to-1 compression? Just let me check. Yeah, that's right. This is the much sought after 8-to-1 compression rather than the 7-to-1. You can tell because it's got this raised lub on here, this little chunk of squareness. This signifies a higher compression engine. 8-to-1 isn't really earth-shattering, is it? But you've got to remember that these engines were made to run on low-quality fuel, sort of in the African continent or Asia or somewhere like that, where they, in the 60s and 70s, where they didn't have high-quality fuel. These were sort of like European spec, but they actually did 7-to-1 compression for overseas when they first came out. You know, in fact, all of them did actually, and then they just went a little bit higher compression. So I think until we get that on, we'll pause this video and then we'll come back with the gearbox sorted out.